Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and my Little League team has now lost their first 2 games in a row. Yesterday, we lost 7-4, and you'll never guess how many RBIs my son had and how many times he scored. He scored 1 time yesterday, and he had 3 RBIs. So my son pretty much scored all of the runs for the team single-handedly. We cannot win games if it's only my son hitting in runs and scoring runs. And so we're starting out slow. It's a hitting issue. We have the first game, our team only hit as a team for 1 inning. Yesterday, they hit as a team for about 2.5 innings. If we can get that to about 4 innings, we're going to win all of our games because we got a good infield. So that's where it's at. A lot of times you have to adjust and get. Sometimes the kids are just nervous in the beginning and they come into their own as time goes along. So I'm hoping for that. All right, from XRP Crypto Wolf. And by the way, I'm late this morning because I put together an entire video. I spent 2 or 3 hours on it and then decided that I was just not comfortable with doing that video. So I wanted to do something a little lighter. So this is from XRP Crypto Wolf. The United Kingdom's trade negotiators want global blockchain regulations in its upcoming trade talks with the U.S. It included plans for increasing cooperation with fintech and crypto assets. There are calls for closer cross-border crypto partnerships. And XRP Crypto Wolf had sent me a couple of things, but one of them I was going to show, but it had one of those words that I'm not allowed to say on YouTube, and so I can't show his tweet. All right, from at Matthew Lineye. Deloitte, who is XRP integrated, will use AWS to expand into China and Eastern Asia with multiple blockchain applications. He's got a couple of interesting slides here. There you saw digital right here. And then it's got cross-border payments here in the middle. And here's the crypto-based loyalty. But anyway, he's just showing you a few diagrams. Okay, now I want to get into the meat of what I wanted to talk about today. The first thing was this tweet right here. I can confirm the White House meeting with bank CEOs will be on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. The nation's biggest 7 banks have all been invited, maybe more too. I know at least 2 will send their CEO. I imagine all other than JP Morgan will do so. Some industry bodies like ABA invited. Now, if this isn't a flashback for you to the financial crisis, then you've got another thing coming. I took a picture from CNBC. This was the picture that they flashed today. These are the guys that are going to meet at the White House at 3 p.m. today. U.S. Bancorp, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, JP Morgan. These are the guys that pretty much rule the world. And I said these guys will be meeting at the White House today at 3 p.m. Financial crisis flashback. Last time, they didn't have a solution to the liquidity problem. And that, for me, is key. Because I think this, 2020, is the year that liquidity is solved. And I believe it's solved by digital assets, more specifically XRP. Or I believe it is the beginning of the problem being solved this year. That's maybe a better way to say it. This is from Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary of the United States. This is not a bailout. This is considering providing certain things for certain industries, airlines, hotels, and cruise lines. They are talking about bailing out these industries, folks. Mnuchin, the U.S. government will issue loan guarantees to corporations. Anyone want to interpret that? These are bailouts. They can call them whatever they want, but they are talking about bailing out some of these industries. one thing I said, I remember it like it was yesterday, right after the bailouts back during the financial crisis. I was at a party and I'm standing in a room and I'm talking to a banker. I don't remember which bank he was from, but he's talking about how the bailouts worked and that was a good thing. And I told him while I was standing there was one guy who has a business in the air conditioning business, and then this banker's talking about how the bailouts were so good. I told him at that point, I said, no, the bailouts is the worst thing that ever happened to finance in this country. I said, do you know why? Because next time, who's to say what industry is critical and too big to fail next time? This time they saved you, the bankers. Next time, what's it going to be? Are they going to say to the guy who owns the air conditioning company, well, we could all die if we don't have air conditioning. And so next time it might be the air conditioning company. Or, as in this time, they're talking about bailing out airlines. They're talking about bailing out cruise ship companies. So the point is once they let that bailout genie out of the bottle, once the government saw they could do that, you just went from a world of capitalism to something far different. Now they see that they can get away with it. So now you're in a bailout culture, and it's not called capitalism anymore, folks. Whenever they have a great enough emergency, they can do whatever they want because the public let them do it the first time without having a revolution of some sort. And then we've got this from Chris Podog. Federal Reserve Bank of New York repo injections, the 3rd of January 2020, 502 billion. 3rd of March 2020, 616 billion. 9th of March 2020, 641 billion. See where all this is going? Then X-Men XRP sent me this. ECBs Lagarde warns of 2008 style crisis unless Europe acts. Remember, everybody has to act fast, folks. This is a scary situation. It's an emergency. Everything's going down, right? Michelle Vandenberg sent me this. This is a summary of what she said. Lagarde said her officials are looking at all their tools. When you hear tool, think bailout and all that type of stuff. For Thursday's policy decision, particularly measures to provide super cheap funding and ensure liquidity. I wonder what super cheap funding is. I can tell you that if XRP was involved in providing liquidity, it would be super, super cheap. So now let's go to this. I wanted to show you this. What you're looking at here is a clip that I found of Ben Bernanke, Tim Geithner, and Hank Paulson. All of these guys were the guys that handled the financial crisis the first go around, folks. And I've told you it was the first go around because for the last 10 years, they've done nothing but put a Band-Aid on the problem. I believe that part of what their fix is liquidity provided by digital assets, probably specifically XRP. But let's listen to what this is a video of these guys reflecting on the problems and what scared them the most about the financial crisis. Listen closely.
Start with a rapid fire question for the three of you. Kind of an obvious one. What was the most terrifying moment of the crisis and why? Why don't we just go right down the row here?
Well, there are plenty of terrifying moments for me, but I'll focus today on, when the moment I learned that the House was voting down the TARP the first time, because and there was sort of a mix of devastation and terror, but to go to Congress and to say that the administration is powerless to prevent a financial meltdown and avoid an economic catastrophe unless you act, that's an untenable position to be in. It's a difficult position to be in. And when they vote it down, you're exposing your vulnerability to the whole world. So immediately we scrambled and we were too busy to be terrified. But I still remember that night waking up in the middle of the night and saying, wow, if we don't get what we need from Congress, how are we ever going to put this thing together? And that's when I was looking at Food Line.
I'm going to pause there for a second on this video and relate to you what he's talking about during that time. He literally, I'll never forget it, he literally had to kneel down on one knee to Nancy Pelosi to get her to, and begged her to get the TARP bailout passed. And I believe, and I've always believed, there's not always, but there's not one part of me that doesn't believe it now. I believe that was the moment. Well, he said he couldn't go to sleep because he couldn't believe that they were depending in a financial crisis, depending on what a bunch of politicians were going to do or not do. And I believe that the federal government and the governments of the world left that situation and said, we have to figure out how to resolve this problem. I believe that that's what Ripple is all about, is them being able to solve their liquidity problems without having to go and beg Nancy Pelosi or any other politician. They've got to have this written into some type of a policy. That's what I believe.
And massive unemployment and so on.
We'll come back to that. Tim, your worst moment.
Man.
A lot of choices there.
Rich menu. Yeah. I think the hardest thing were in those weeks, I would say BC, before Capital, before TARP. When I think we thought the thing was like, at that point, gone way beyond the strength of the tools we had to address at that point. You know, the Fed at that point was like way beyond the traditional frontiers of the use of the lender of last resort authority. It was not working. It was not enough, and that was scary. And then, you know, when the President Obama was started getting ready to take office, at that point, we were looking at an economy that was still falling off the cliff, shrinking annual rate about 8% of GDP in real terms. And there was this deep perception then, despite all the force of the actions that had been put in place in the fall, despite backstopping trillions and trillions of dollars of liabilities in the financial system in the U.S. and globally, all the capital injections, there was this deep conviction in early January that the system was insolvent, would need another trillion or more of capital. And trying to decide then what would work, what might be enough, what mix of things would solve it. That was hard too. But there were other moments, I'm sure.
And then your biggest nightmare moment.
AIG day after Lehman's failure, President Bush sent Hank and me down to explain to Congress about the $85 billion loan, and we met with a select group of the heads of the both parties and the banking committees and so on, and we explained why we had to do this, why it was essential. Will it work? We think so. Will you get your money back? We certainly hope so. At the end of this discussion, though, Harry Reid, who was the majority leader at that time, looked at Hank and me and he said, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for coming over here and explaining this to us. It's been very helpful. He said, but I want you to understand one thing. Nothing you've heard here tonight constitutes congressional approval for what you're about to do. This is your call and your responsibility. So like Hank, it was pretty evident early on that the political support for this was not going to be particularly overwhelming, and it was a very lonely feeling.
I don't believe that they wanted to feel that way again. Okay, so against that backdrop, I'll keep playing these two clips. Here's one.
Years out on the financial crisis, we still don't have the infrastructure perhaps to prevent the next one. And I think this is where digital assets can really help, because an efficient digital asset can really solve some of the key problems in global liquidity. The world's got trillions and trillions of dollars tied up in liquidity just to get around how clunky the movement of value is around the world. If with a really efficient digital asset, something like XRP, again, that's what we believe will be the most efficient, you can now reduce trillions and trillions of capital from being tied up. So you can make those transfers instantly as a bank or as a payment provider or as an enterprise without having to have money pre-positioned all over the world. So that's...
And then it's important to see this one. Remember, this is Brianna Madigan, who was at Goldman Sachs, I believe.
Attribute of a healthy liquid market is really resilience, and that is getting at the ability for a market to recover from a significant systemic event. The attribute of a healthy liquid market is really resilience, and that is getting at the ability for a market to recover from a significant systemic event.
You mean recover from a significant systemic event, like maybe not having to go deal with Congress and being able to push a button and make it happen. It's like, what? Okay, and now I want to make another point. One thing we've talked about a lot on this channel is there are at least a handful of early Ripple investors who never will say, I've always talked about this, these guys will never acknowledge that XRP is going to do anything. They'll never say it unless they're specifically asked, usually. And if they do say Ripple, it'll in Mike Novogratz case, it'll be something bad. Well, I wanted to relate this to this. I've been showing you, this is the Everest document to the Internet of Value. It has this timeline where basically Ripple, the interledger protocol, becomes the standard protocol towards 2020. And then 2020 to 25 is when everything goes in motion. Well, I just want to present to you, I believe that these guys, and I'm talking these guys, Barry Silbert and him, what I've come to is I believe that these guys have seen Bitcoin as their first moneymaker. They want to make the money on Bitcoin, and then I think that these guys know all about this timeline. And I think they know what the plan is. And so I just wanted to play you Mike Novogratz's part, and it'll all kind of make sense because both of these guys, the only thing they're willing to say is that this is more, that Bitcoin's for now and Ripple or XRP is for like the next 2 to 5 years. Listen to Mike Novogratz.
Have to be used. I separate cryptocurrencies into Bitcoin, which I think is a finished product, and the rest of cryptocurrencies.
He knows XRP is a finished product, but I don't think, I think that he knows about the timeline.
Which are use cases that are still to be proven. Some are have spectacular possibilities. Something is going to be the trust layer that lots of stuff gets built on.
You want trust layer? This means trust layer right here. Okay?
That's programmable. Ripple is trying to be a payment rail for all the money that sits in between the banking system. And so I look at those as more venture bets. And some are going to win and you're going to win big on. But that's 3 to 4 or 5 years away where I see Bitcoin.
Right. So he's kind of shown his hand there to me. Now, many of you have probably never seen this. This is a tweet from Barry Silbert. Now, remember, Barry Silbert is the CEO of the Digital Currency Group. He's also on the board with Glenn Hutchins. Glenn Hutchins is a huge figure. Bank of New York, Reserve Bank of New York. I think he's the head guy. But anyway, major figure. Barry Silbert tweeted this in 2016. He was comfortable tweeting it in 2016. Bitcoin's digital gold, Ripple XRP, Swift 2.0, Ethereum Classic, gas for the Internet of Things, Zcash, private transactions. Now, at some point from 2016, all of a sudden he became like he didn't want to talk about it anymore, Ripple or XRP, unless he was asked. So then someone asked him in the XRP community, and he replied to them. This is in 2019, July 2019. Ripple, the company, is our largest investment. XRP is not on our conviction list of holdings yet. Super bullish on the company, neutral on the token as of now. I believe Barry Silbert knows this. I believe they all know this. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe. Hit the like button and tell your friends and family that these guys know they know Mike Novogratz just told you that it's for all of the money. He said it. Thank you for listening.